Pensions can be awesome, very, but they're not all the same. Some are better than others. Some have more options than others, and they all affect your retirement differently. My name is Reese. I'm the founder of Well Built Wealth, and we pound out a silly amount of retirement plans. We've pretty much seen it all. And one thing that we know for sure is that when someone has a beefy pension, it doesn't just change how they spend money in retirement, but it also changes how they sleep. But again, not all pensions are created equal. So today I'm going to go over the key points of the main types of pension plans in Canada. And I'm also going to illustrate how some of these can play out in real life. Now, please note, this is a long video. There's a lot of good things to cover, but don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing. I've broken it down into chapters below, so you can just hop around to whatever section you like, whenever you like. And also note that when we do get to the illustration section, for the sake of time, there's only so much I can show you. But when it comes to doing this work for actual clients, we always get them to send us all of the options that they're considering with their pensions. And then we build them all into the software that we use so that we can compare them against each other and how they affect the rest of their situation. It's so good. It's so clear. Anyway, to start this joyride, we need to draw a big fat line between the two main kinds of pensions, defined benefit and defined contribution. Now, don't let that jargon scare you off. These are actually really easy to understand just by looking at how they're titled. Defined contribution simply means that the contributions, or the amounts going into the plan, are defined. So the amounts going in are known, but the amounts coming out when you're retired are unknown. For example, your employer may tell you that they promise to put in 4% of your salary, and you have to match that. Or maybe they'll contribute 6% and you don't have to match anything. How the contributions are structured totally depends on how loaded and/or generous the employer is. But regardless of what the actual amount is, that is all that they are promising. They are not promising you how much your monthly pension benefit will be in retirement. In fact, with defined contribution pension plans, your employer typically doesn't even want to have anything to do with what your money is actually invested in. They usually leave that up to you. Whoever they are using to facilitate the pension, often an insurance company like Manulife, Sun Life, Canada Life, or whatever, they will provide you with a number of investment options, usually ranging from really conservative to really aggressive, and then you pick what you want. So the amount you end up with in retirement is simply the result of the defined contributions, the amount of money that went into the plan, and the results of the investment choices that you made along the way. And then when it does come time for retirement, you generally have a couple of main options. One is to take the value of your pension and buy an annuity with it. In this case, the insurance company takes your money permanently and gives you a guaranteed stream of income for life in return. Now, people do love the idea of guarantees, but they don't typically love the idea of parting ways with huge chunks of money permanently. So this option doesn't actually see a lot of play. The other, far more popular option is to convert your pension account into a locked-in retirement account, a LIRA. A LIRA is a lot like an RSP. You manage the money and the results are on you. The key difference here is that a LIRA is still under pension legislation, so there's a few extra rules attached. For instance, when you are ready to start taking retirement income and you convert your RRSP to a RIF, there is a rule that states that you now have to take out a minimum amount from your RIF each year. But if you have a LIRA and are ready to start taking retirement income, you have to convert the LIRA to a LIF. And with a LIF, there are minimum withdrawal rules as well, but there are also maximum withdrawal rules in addition. The logic here is that because these accounts are still under pension legislation, they are supposed to provide you with a source of income for the rest of your life, like a normal pension would. And so by capping the amount that you can pull out in any given year, the hope is that it will stop you from blasting through all of your money too quickly. Now, obviously, there's way more that we can say about LIRAs and LIFs, but that's for another video. The key point here is that defined contribution pension plans are great because your employer is contributing to your retirement. But that is all that they are doing. They are not promising you guaranteed income for life. That is what you get with a defined benefit pension, the other main type of pension. With this type of pension, the employer is defining or spelling out the benefit, the amount you will get from your pension for the rest of your life once you retire. Now, these plans are totally hands-off. You do not need to make any investment decisions at all. That's the responsibility of your employer or the plan administrator. But either way, it doesn't affect how much you'll get. Your benefit is usually a calculation of a number of factors, such as your salary over time, how long you and or your employer have contributed to the plan, and when you choose to retire. Now, technically speaking, it's not just the benefit that they're defining. Just like a defined contribution plan, they are also defining the amount going into the plan. But the key feature here is the benefit, the guaranteed income for life. That said, we do need to be careful with the word guaranteed. There have been cases where companies or pensions got themselves into hot water and were not able to fully deliver what they promised. So as with many things in life that are guaranteed, they're only guaranteed until they're not. And that is a perfect segue into the next phase of our discussion, the different kinds of defined benefit pensions. See, at first glance, it is very easy to look at defined benefit pensions as though they are the holy grail, way better than defined contribution pensions. After all, it's guaranteed income for life versus not guaranteed. End of contest. But not so fast, mon petit chouchou. Not all defined benefit pensions are as solid as others. For instance, pension plans in the private sector, even if they have unions, can vary in quality quite a bit. As I mentioned earlier, solvency can be a real risk. Private companies can go bankrupt, or their plans can end up underfunded and therefore unable to deliver what they promised. It's rare, but to pretend it doesn't happen would be silly. And also, many private sector pension plans do not include indexing. And what that means is that the benefit amount stays the same the whole time you receive it. It never increases with inflation. This is a huge deal. Indexing makes a massive difference, and I'll show you what I mean more near the end of the video. But for now, what I'll say is this. If your employer or the pension plan itself looks to be on shaky ground, and your pension plan does not include indexing, you may want to consider whether or not you even want to keep it there. You may want to look at having it managed elsewhere. But at the same time, don't let that spook you. There are a lot of private sector pension plans that are entirely delicious, but they are not all created equal. Public sector defined benefit pensions, on the other hand, are pretty much always dusted with a fine layer of gold. And that's primarily because these plans are backstopped by governments. And I don't think I have ever seen one that wasn't indexed for inflation. So yeah, these plans are solid and they're awesome. But that doesn't mean there's no risk. Governments can borrow themselves into oblivion. Just ask the people of Greece. But our governments don't seem to think that can happen here, so maybe Canada has herd immunity against the laws of economics. I'm not sure. But aside from economic collapse, these pensions are pretty darn tight. Now, as I alluded to earlier, when you retire or leave your employer, you don't necessarily have to take the monthly retirement benefit if you don't want to. You often have the ability to take the value of your pension, which is commonly referred to as the commuted value, and transfer it out so that you or a financial institution can manage it. To be clear, if you do this, you are walking away from the guaranteed monthly income, and you are now responsible for that pot of money and how much it grows or doesn't grow. And that could work out great for you or terribly. So obviously, you don't want to make this decision lightly. If you have a solid pension, we almost always recommend you just leave it alone and take the guaranteed income for life. Because even if you take it and manage it on your own and you do a great job with your investments and end up getting more out of it than you would have with the guaranteed income, that will not happen without some tangible anxiety along the way. The fact is, investment markets are volatile. And while they can lead to wonderful results over the long term, there is an emotional and psychological weight to carrying that responsibility yourself. So for most people, having it all handled and guaranteed for the rest of their life is pretty stinking attractive on a whole bunch of levels. It's peace of mind. That said, there are cases where it does make sense to leave the guarantees and take the commuted value. Like what I said before about maybe having a shaky employer or your pension not being indexed. Another reason people often bring up is that their monthly pension income will stop when they die. And if they happen to die earlier rather than later, then they will have put in way more money into the pension than they ever got out. And that is a very fair point. But it has to be balanced out with the other side of the equation as well. You could end up living a very long life, and the pension has to pay you your whole life, no matter how long you live. My wife's grandfather is a great example. He retired with a sweet defined benefit pension around age 55 and ended up living past 100. He cost that pension plan a lot of money. And actually, that's one of the main reasons these defined benefit pension plans are going the way of the dodo bird. It is a very scary long-term commitment for employers. They may be more than willing to help with your retirement, but guaranteeing income for the rest of your life is a very big deal. Now, if you do decide to commute the value of your pension, it ends up looking a lot like what happens to a defined contribution pension plan, like we discussed earlier. You simply transfer it into a LIRA if you don't need the income right away, or you transfer it into a LIF if you do want income right away. And depending on how juicy your pension is, you may find that there is a portion of the commuted value called an excess amount. This chunk does not go into your LIRA, drops right into your bank account, and is taxable in the year you get it. While it is nice to get a chunk of money that isn't confined to a LIRA or a LIF, the tax implications of getting that lump sum can be nasty. And we've seen many of these be in the hundreds of thousands. And when added to whatever other income was made that year, it can easily push huge amounts of these into the top tax brackets. And to put it simply, that means you could end up losing over half of it to tax right off the bat. But here's a couple of pro tips. One way to mitigate some of the damage would be to put as much of this excess amount as you can into an RRSP. So even though the excess amount is fully taxable, whatever you put into your RRSP will get you an offsetting tax deduction. This can work beautifully. But how well this works totally depends on how much RRSP contribution room you actually have left. And often, people with large pensions don't tend to have a lot of RRSP room anymore because their pension contributions all along the years have gobbled most of it up. Another maneuver is to retire at the beginning of the year. This way, your income for the year will likely be lower, and therefore less of your excess amount will need to be taxed at those higher tax rates. The last thing I'll say about taking the commuted value is that many pension plans will allow you to continue on with some form of your health benefits package after you retire. You'll have to pay for it, but it's often an option. However, it's usually only an option if you take the guaranteed monthly income for life. If you take the commuted value, you'll likely lose that option. But that's enough on commuted value. What does it look like if you decide to take the monthly pension instead, like most people do? Well, that totally depends because there are usually a bunch of different options and/or paths that you can take. But to keep this video from becoming an epic, I'm just going to focus in on some of the most common. The first are the single or joint life options. If you're single, you'll simply default to the single life option. And that just means that your pension will pay you for the rest of your life. And that's pretty much all there is to it. But if you have a spouse, you'll likely have the joint option as well. Now, in some cases, you might not even actually have that choice. It might just be automatic. But anyway, if you choose this option, your monthly pension will continue paying out to your spouse for the rest of their life if you pass away before they do. And needless to say, this is a pretty attractive option for a lot of couples. Now, some plans will automatically dictate the percentage that will carry on to the surviving spouse. But with some plans, you have the option to choose. 100%, 80%, and 60% are super common options. Now, you may be wondering why anyone would choose anything less than 100%. Obviously, you want the most possible to carry on to your spouse if you were to pass away before them. True, but it comes at a cost. The more percentage you want to cover your spouse for, the less your monthly pension benefit will be. For instance, Maybe your monthly pension at age 65 is estimated to be $4,000 a month with a 60% survivor benefit if you were to pass away. So if you died, your spouse would carry on receiving $2,400 a month for the rest of their life, plus any inflation indexing that may be included. But right below that option, you see the 80% survivor benefit option. If you choose this one, your monthly pension would drop to $3,850 a month. But if you pass away, your spouse would receive $3,080 a month, plus any applicable indexing for the rest of their life. And then you notice the 100% survivor benefit option. This option shaves your monthly pension down to $3,700 a month. But if you pass away, your spouse would receive the full $3,700 a month plus any indexing for the rest of their life. Now, these are just pretend numbers, but that's basically how it works. It's kind of like an insurance premium. The more you want to cover your spouse for, the more you have to pay. The next very common option is often referred to as the guarantee period, but it may go by other names. Essentially, this is the minimum amount of time that the pension is guaranteed to pay out for. Guarantee periods of 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years are pretty common options. If you die before the period is over, the pension plan will continue to make the payments to your beneficiaries up and until the guarantee period. So if you chose a 10-year guarantee, but passed away 8 years into receiving your pension, then the pension would continue to make payments all the way up to the 10-year mark. However, if you passed away at year 11, nothing further would be owed by the pension, unless, of course, you have a spouse and chose the joint life option. And as with the joint life options, the beefier you want your guarantee period to be, the more it's going to cost you. However, statistically, you're not likely to die that early, and so the cost difference between choosing a 5-year guarantee and, say, a 15-year guarantee is actually usually pretty small. The last option I'll cover is bridging. Now, this isn't really an option so much as a feature of many defined benefit pensions. Basically, bridging is an extra amount of money paid to you on top of your regular monthly pension benefit up to the age of 65. The reason this was created was because the normal age to start Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security is age 65. So pension plans wanted to help those who were retiring before age 65 bridge that period with extra income until their CPP and OAS kicked in at age 65. Then their monthly pension benefit would decrease permanently since they're now collecting CPP and OAS. The idea is that this would lead to a smoother level of income all throughout retirement. Now, it needs to be stressed that this bridging amount is not free money. Typically, any extra amount you get before age 65 is offset by getting a smaller amount after age 65. In fact, waiting to retire until 65 and bypassing the bridging altogether often leads to a much higher monthly benefit. But it really does depend on the particular plan, how many years of service you have, etc. Okay, now the last thing I want to point out about taking the monthly pension option is that it is eligible for pension income splitting starting at age 55, which is awesome because most other forms of pension income that you can split, such as RIF or LIF income, are not eligible to split until you hit age 65. So that's the potential for an extra decade of income splitting, which doesn't always make a massive difference, but in some cases, especially when your spouse has a lower income than you, it can save you a ton of money in taxes. Now, to pull all this together and to bring it to life, I want to run you through a couple of quick illustrations. First, I want to show you the massive difference between a pension that is indexed to grow with inflation and one that isn't. Meet Bree McGee. She just retired at age 65 with a defined benefit pension of $4,500 a month. And since her pension is one of the sweet ones, it is indexed to grow with inflation. Now, she doesn't have any other savings, but she does have CPP and OAS, which are also indexed to grow with inflation. And together, those total up to $1,800 a month. So she's got $6,300 a month, all indexed to grow with inflation, coming in like clockwork. And that's great because that's pretty much exactly what she needs to cover all her bills, which will also grow with inflation all throughout her retirement. And if we look at this in our fancy software, we can see how this all lines up. She is 100% on track. she has exactly what she needs to get by. She has her pension income, her CPP, and her OAS. Now, each year that goes by, these bars are all getting taller, and that's because of inflation. She needs more money each year as the cost of everything goes up. However, in her case, her pension and her CPP and OAS are all increasing each year with inflation as well. So it's all good in the hood. But what if Bree's pension was not indexed to grow with inflation? How would that affect her? Well, pretty badly. We can see that she's fine for the first 5 years, but since her pension isn't indexed, which is why it's staying flat down here, she starts to show shortfalls in year 6, which is indicated by the color red. And once these shortfalls start, they only get nastier with time. In one sense, all of this is totally obvious, but in another sense, seeing it visually and thinking about your situation in these terms can help bring a lot of clarity as to what kind of a position you're really in. Now, the last thing I want to illustrate is taking the commuted value versus taking the monthly pension. To save time, we're not going to get into survivor options or anything like that. We're going to keep it super simple. And Tennille O'Neill is going to help us with that. Tennille is turning 55 in January, which is also when she plans to retire. She thinks she's going to live until age 90, and being a meticulous budgeter, she knows she can get by on $3,700 per month after tax. And lastly, in addition to her pension, she has also socked away $120,000 in her TFSA. Now, obviously, Tennille is make-believe, but the pension numbers we're going to use here are based on a case that we worked on recently. Anyway, Tennille has been given a statement showing her options for what she can do with her defined benefit pension when she retires. The first option she has is to take a guaranteed monthly pension for the rest of her life. Lucky for her, this pension is indexed to grow with inflation. And since she's retiring before age 65, this pension also includes bridging. So here's what that looks like. Starting at age 55, she will get $2,300 indexed per month for the rest of her life. But she will also get a bridge benefit of $750 a month until she turns 65, which is the normal age for OAS and CPP to kick in. So this is a total of $3,050 per month starting at age 55. But again, once she hits age 65, that bridge benefit is done bridging her to CPP and OAS. And so her pension drops back down to the $2,300 per month base benefit, plus any inflation indexing that happened along the way. And you can see that really clearly here where the blue bar drops at age 65 at the same time as CPP and OAS kick in. Anyway, aside from that, you can see that she is 100% on track of reaching her goal. Between her TFSA savings and her pension, CPP, and OAS, which are all indexed to grow with inflation, she's pretty much good to go. Okay, now the second option is to forego the guaranteed monthly pension and take the commuted value instead. And in her case, the total commuted value is $480,000, which is a decent chunk of money. But what should Tennille do? Again, we would argue that if you have a solid pension that's going to pay you guaranteed income for the rest of your life without you even needing to think about it, that is not something that you should give up lightly. The sleep factor alone is incredibly attractive. But never mind our opinions. What does the math say? What does our fancy software show us if we compare the two options? Well, that totally depends on the variables. Let me show you. As mentioned before, we have Tennille retiring at 55 and living until 90, which is 35 years that she will need income for. And since she wants to start taking income as soon as she retires, she is going to take the $480,000 commuted value of her pension and transfer it over into a LIF account. And to start with, let's assume that she will make 5% growth on this account for the rest of her life. If this is how it all plays out, we can see that she will have far more shortfalls throughout her retirement. She drops from 100% solved down to 82% solved. Notice that she is taking out the maximum amount allowed each year from her LIF all throughout her retirement, which is indicated in these two shades of blue which are just breaking down the minimum portion and the additional portion up to the max. And since her maximum withdrawals are not enough to cut it, she is topping up what she needs from her TFSA, which now runs out 8 years into retirement. So this definitely doesn't look like a better option. But remember, this is assuming two things: a relatively long life and a bit of a boring rate of return. But these are really common assumptions for people to plan with, because most people tend to want to be conservative about how they expect the future to play out. And that's wise. You don't want to just plan for sunshine and rainbows, because clouds are a real thing, and so are storms. But you may have legitimate reasons for tweaking some of the variables. Maybe you have a shortened life expectancy, or maybe you're one of the world's best investors. I don't know. But for the sake of time, let's just look at one more tweak. Let's say she was able to make 7% on her investments for the rest of her life rather than 5%. Look at that. Huge difference. Jump back from 82% to 96% solved. Not bad. And needless to say, the higher your expected rate of return, the better this will look. But then again, how sure are you that you're going to be able to pull that off over the long run? Anyway, there's a lot we can do here. We haven't even looked at shortened life expectancies or lower rates of return or CPP, OAS timing, etc., etc. But this is probably the longest video I have ever made, so I'm just going to shut up now.